The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
What's up, everybody? It's time for Need to Know, another edition on the Tony Kurre Network. It is Monday, St. Patrick's Day. I'm representing with my my former wife, I should say, my lovely ex-bride, Kathy. She was a proud graduate of the South Florida Institution of Higher Learning in Tampa. It's about the only green garment I had, so I dug deep and found that today so I could fit right in on St. Patrick's Day 2025. It's a big deal in a lot of cities around the country. The big parade in New York today. I wonder how many imbecilic protesters will be trying to ruin that event for everybody that really wants to just get out and revel. If you've ever been to Savannah, Georgia, of all places, I still have no idea why that's one of the preeminent spots to go celebrate St. Patrick's Day. But man, they do it up right. They have these massive pub crawls down the main street in downtown Savannah. The people patronize all the bars and restaurants. It's live music. It's just a party. It's one of those things that when you're there, you go, why don't I come here every year? And I haven't been in 20 years, but I know it's bigger and better than ever. So a couple of suggestions for next year. Probably a little late to hop in the ride and jet, or you can jet, but or drive over to Savannah. But that's a southern alternative if you're into the whole St. Patrick's Day thing. I do different things here on the program. If you're just listening for the first time, great to have you. I won't go through the whole preamble because people who listen to me every week don't want to hear it for the 400th time. But basically, I don't tell you what to think. I tell you things you should consider when you think for yourself, because there are really, without making an effort, and if you're listening to this show, you are making an effort to kind of broaden your horizons and get some different perspectives. I don't come to you with any kind of political agenda. I just want to make sense of things and look at everything from every angle. I'm wary of every kind of politician, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Democrat, socialist, whatever the hell they are. They all basically have the same goal: to enhance their personal wealth and notoriety. And it's gotten our country into a hell of a mess. But I want to get away a little bit from talking about Trump and talking about the Democrats gone crazy. I don't think, Girls Gone Wild was a successful franchise in terms of people buying ridiculous spring break, and it is spring break season right now. I don't know if Girls Gone Wild is still in action, but this is Democrats gone crazy. I don't think Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and the new stars of the party, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and the insane Jasmine Crockett. I don't think that video would be a high seller. I'm sure it's on DVD now. We've gone way past video, but I'm gonna just kind of put that on the shelf right now. I will say, of course, the big headline since we talked last week was we talked about the interim spending bill to keep the government open. It's usually a big Democrat tactic, and the Republicans reluctantly cave and go along at the end because none of them want to shut down the government. None of them want the burden of constituents reacting to that dynamic happening. Although shutting down the government is really kind of a misnomer, because when the government gets shut down, and it's only happened a couple of times in the last 20 years, the people that I love this, and I've used it several times on the show. When Tom Barrasso, the senator from Wyoming, said, Well, the thing about a government shutdown is all of the essential employees are still active and are still compensated, which begs the question, and I've asked it before, but if you haven't heard it, consider this. If all the essential employees are still working and being paid, what the hell do we classify the majority of government employees that Doge right now, under the direction of Elon Musk, is trying to crack down on the waste, abuse, fraud, and I add theft that's happening to so many of our tax dollars. If the folks that are essential are still working and getting paid, what the hell are the other people? That means they're not essential. So why are they employed? What the hell do they do? Less than 10% of government employees since COVID in 2020 show up at the office regularly. Some don't go at all. It begs the question, when they wanted to send out the questionnaire, name the 5 things you accomplished last week, and so many people balked at returning that request. It's kind of suggests that they didn't accomplish jack shit because they don't do anything. Well, they do one thing every 2 weeks. That lovely orange envelope, gold envelope, whatever it is, federal check shows up in their mailbox, and they just keep riding the gravy train. So it was amazing this week when, of all people, the minority leader, who was for the last bunch of years the majority leader, the president of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, who's been around the block 9,000 times, a typical long time fixture in Washington. Chuck Schumer realized the political damage that these radical, insane party members like Cortez and Crockett and Bernie Sanders and others. Chuck Schumer completely folded like a cheap suit on Thursday, the day before the deadline, where the government would shut down last Friday. And Chuck basically went to the Republican leadership and said, okay, I'm going to support this continuing resolution, which only means they carry over what the current budget is for a couple more months, with the idea that they're going to pass some great spending bill. The problem with that is most of the recent spending bills have put us in this mess we're in because they just, in a haphazard way, slam it all in one thing, give every representative around the country the pork they want to include. Remember the continuing resolution the Democrats proposed back right around Christmas in December of last year? It was 1,500 pages, something that could have been reduced down to next to nothing, which it was ultimately, because the Republican revision of it was only 28 pages, and they worked together and got that passed. But the 1,500 pages included just wild spending on all kinds of unknown things. And, people say, well, it's Congress's responsibility to allocate the money. That's absolutely true. But Congress, all they do is determine the amounts that are going to be given to each department, each bureau, each agency, each pet project for each senator and congressman. They make those determinations, and then they turn the money over to every major and never heard of obscure organization that you can ever imagine, without ever doing the hard work of demanding accountability for how the money is spent. So there's over 450 recipients of federal funding last year from the stopgap continuing resolution. And a lot of those are not even government organizations. They're called NGOs, non-government organizations. And these are things like Stacey Abrams' Climate Watch, which started just as a fake company, a fake entity with just $100 in the bank. And I railed about this last week, but if you missed it, it's important to know that just a couple of days before the Biden administration blessedly ended, $2 billion with a B dollars were put in the Climate Watch account for Stacey Abrams' organization, who has no expertise on climate, who has no idea what the issues are there. She came out and defended her new organization that they really had the conception of buying for lower income people higher efficient energy appliances because that was going to be better and save them money and really help them out. The real agenda, of course, is to replace anything that's in these homes that is gas, which they look at with a gas, no play on words here. They are aghast at gas appliances because they think they're supposedly bad for the environment. It's one of the selling points to the green new scam, the climate change hoax that they have ridden like Zorro all the way to power and personal wealth. It's just a cesspool there, and it really needs to be cleaned up. But for Chuck Schumer to step up and vote for the continuing Republican resolution and convince 9 of his colleagues to do that, which broke the filibuster, which is the vehicle that the minority party uses to delay votes, that would have got them past the deadline. It takes 60 votes in the Senate. The majority, of course, is just 51, but you have to have 60 votes to break a filibuster. Schumer led the way to having that happen. The bill passed the next morning, and the crisis of the government shutting down and all those non-essential employees not getting a check was averted. So the Democrat Party is in absolute free fall now. It has imploded. It is like the Hindenburg. It's crashing to the ground. Now Chuck Schumer, their quote leader, unquote, is under fire from all the left-wing resistance people, despite the sweeping endorsement that the American people gave Donald Trump and these extremely encouraging poll numbers now of everybody approving so far. Not everybody, but he's at 57% approve what he's done so far. For them to go against that and to take this fierce, defiant side on things like men playing women's sports, which is the ultimate no-brainer, and the Senate, all 45 Democrat senators voted to reject the bill that would make that technically illegal for a male to play women's sports or enter any kind of female locker room, changing facility, restroom, etc. The Democrats voted 45-0 to oppose that common sense bill when polls show that nearly 80% of Americans think that's not only a good idea, it's a no-brainer. But they're taking these ridiculous positions. It's not a long-term remedy to heal what's ailing their party. They are not in touch with Americans because, frankly, they don't care about Americans. They're so opposed to Elon Musk blowing up their brilliantly conceived bureaucratic fourth branch of government. All of these administrations, all of these bureaus, agencies, all of this government fat and, behemoth waste, because those are the places that all the money gets channeled to. And if you cut off their money, you cut off their power, because if that money is not going round and around and winding up in their campaign coffers, Democrats are going to die on the vine. And that's why all of the angst and anxiety in Washington, they really truly believe that Elon Musk is collecting not the waste, fraud, abuse, and theft of the American government system in its current form. The Democrats, especially the radical left Democrats, believe this is their money. And they've referred to it in several speeches as, Elon Musk, get your grubby, greedy hands off of our money. Any dollar you send out of your paycheck to Washington is not Maxine Waters or Jasmine Crockett's or Tlaib or AOC. It's not their money, but it's their private war chest. It's their slush fund to take care of all of the expense necessary to make them be able to keep power and control. Because as long as they're in power and control, they are in the money and personally enriching themselves to unbelievable heights. The founding fathers back in the 1780s, these guys were probably some of the most brilliant human beings that I have awareness of, because these guys had escaped complete autocracy in England and other parts of Europe, all of these kingdoms where the king and queens, respectively, whoever was ruling at the time, was the absolute authority. And they wanted to get away from that. They wanted to build the shining city on the hill, which I've talked about before here on the show. American exceptionalism doesn't mean we're better than anybody else or stuck up. It means we wanted to create something that all the people could benefit from. And that was the vision of this government. And the founding fathers, in those constitutional debates and before the Constitution was written and adopted in 1787, brilliant scholarly guys like future President James Madison, John Jay, who you don't hear his name very much, but he was very important in the drafting and the conception of the components of the Constitution. George Washington didn't contribute to its writing, but became the greatest salesman for the U.S. Constitution in history through his first two presidential administrations. Because once they rolled this thing out, and you're probably thinking, well, you didn't mention Jefferson. People don't understand. Thomas Jefferson, also a future president at that time, was not even in the United States during the drafting of the Constitution. He had lost 4 of his 6 children to illnesses or diseases when they were infants or toddlers. And then his wife, who was only 33 years old at the time, died of some kind of disease. Tough time to be a human being back then. The lifespan not very long. Jefferson was so despondent that so he could kind of get himself together, Washington sent him to Paris to be the ambassador to France from the United States. And he did kind of recollect himself, but he was not a drafter of the Constitution. His protege, James Madison, was the guy. And what they came up with was absolutely brilliant, because they had lived in these authoritarian situations. They were so determined that we would not have a powerful central government. And all of these things that the modern day Democrats are just freaking out over. You can't get rid of the Department of Education. You can't get rid of the Environmental Protection Agency. You can't make changes to the Department of Justice. This is the end of our democracy. Our democracy is not a democracy. It's a republic. That was another thing that the drafters made sure to take care of. They were not going to fall in the trap of letting the simple majority. A democracy is when the majority of people vote for something over the people that they outnumber. And if we lived in a democracy that the Democrats, like trained parrots, say that word in every sentence, if we lived in a democracy, every single solitary election would be won by Democrats, because New York, Illinois, and California, 3 of the massive population centers of our country, would overwhelmingly vote Democrat. And anybody who was living in New Mexico or Montana or Utah or you name it, small, little, tiny states like Rhode Island and Delaware, would have no voice whatsoever in who would be the leader. So the whole electoral process, absolutely brilliant, because that made every state just as significant as the bigger states. Now, the bigger states, the way they made up for that difference, of course, was by population, giving a lot more electoral votes to those big states because they have more people. That's only fair. But the bottom line is, without winning some other states, that does not swing an election on its own when the 3 biggest population centers vote emphatically one way. They still have to win other parts of the country to win the presidency. An absolutely brilliant conception that the Democrats complain about in years where it doesn't work in their favor. They thought it was just fine and dandy in the Joe Biden election in 2020. The Electoral College, what a great thing. Joe Biden carried the day, won some swing states. Not this time. Donald Trump won every swing state, every state that was not pretty much in the bag. You knew who was going to go red or blue going into the election. But those 7 states that were supposedly seriously in contention, Donald Trump won every single one, and is the first Republican since way back at George W. Bush to win an absolute majority of the votes. So even if this was a democracy, the president would be Donald Trump right now. That's what kind of strong mandate sent him to Washington. So that's why they're fighting so fiercely. This is the gravy train that funds all of their activities. And if you tear down this bureaucracy, if you take away the senseless allocation of billions of dollars to these people that have the far left agenda, we are lost, because our taxpayer money, if you look at your check, about a third of it, maybe some people even a half of it, is taken away before it ever sees your ownership. You just see it on the stub of your check that they've taken 45% out or whatever. And if that money is just being senselessly wasted to the tune now where we are in a 36 trillion with a T, that's $1,000 billion. That's just 1 trillion. This is 36 trillion. So that's 36,000 billion dollars. I mean, you can't even conceive that. It's just beyond all comprehension, because government is just wasting your money. You hear all of the tales of, whoa, Social Security is going to be broke in 4 or 5 years. People like my sons in their 30s, say, why do I have to have money taken out for Social Security? It's not even going to exist after, when I get anywhere close to being able to access it. But one of the reasons it won't exist isn't just because of the waste, theft, and abuse. It is the complete indifference of the massive government, which employs so many people that do absolutely nothing, that some of the research that Doge and Elon Musk group have done show that all kinds of people that have been dead for 25 years still receive Social Security checks. It's absolutely shameful. The money that's just sent out the window, that never is accounted for, nobody follows up. Every business, I'm involved with the Birmingham Racing Commission. We have an annual audit every year where they examine every bit of money that came in, every bit of money that came out. And it is a process that you have to pass the test each year to continue functioning. Well, I mean, how does the federal government not have an audit every year? The military at the Pentagon, in the Department of Defense, in the last 8 years, they've had audits that have been prompted by the higher ups in our military. But in 8 of those years, they failed miserably in 7 of them. There's money missing, there's money misappropriated, but there's never any repercussions, because the government organism is not going to admit that they've allowed this to happen, and they're not going to let anything negative hurt the franchise. They want everything to stay exactly the way it is. They don't want any change. They don't want any improvement. They don't want the government downsized to be more efficient. And the founders, again, so brilliant, because they knew what was coming. If government was allowed, the central government, the federal government, was allowed to grow into this giant, uncontrolled, corrupt organization, and corruption comes at its height when one entity controls everything. And in the Congress, in the House right now, the Republicans, it's their time. The pendulum has swung that way. They control both houses. The presidency is also very uniquely now Republican held, so they have all 3. Obama had that a few years back. It doesn't happen all that often. The system works better when there's checks and balances. But the reason the Democrats are so up in arms is because has this fourth branch of government, which really is the most critical because it winds up controlling and allocating the money. And you've heard about some of the ridiculous things that your government has been shelling, not only millions of dollars, but billions of dollars to people like Stacey Abrams' fake organization. When you hear that, it's abundantly clear that the Democrats are fighting like tigers because this really, arguably, is the most important part of their entire stranglehold on everything. And when you have one organization, and don't you kid yourself, Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia voted for Kamala Harris 92%. Democrat votes for president in the last election that Trump won in a romp, but 92% was the vote out of D.C., the District of Columbia, and Northern Virginia, where all the government employees live. All this bureaucracy, all of this administration, all of these self-important people who are protected by their own unions and cannot be fired or replaced. They are bulletproof. They think they can get away with anything because they have for so long. This is strictly a Democrat stronghold. This is a far left, absolute vice grip on all of our proceeds, and it is why we're in such desperate economic stress now, because we've stuck our head in the sand. The leaders we've elected have benefited from it. If you're a Republican, listen to this, you should be outraged that Republican voters said to Washington have not done anything except for join in on the party because people are stuffing their pockets full of checks. It is so corrupt and so bad, it's beyond all comprehension. So if you hadn't heard me talk about elements of this before, I wanted to have one good kind of solid presentation talking about that. I had some other things on my mind today, but I think for once, I'm going to try to be succinct and leave you with those pretty strong impressions of what exactly is happening and how Chuck Schumer really may have started something that is unprecedented in the Democrat Party in the recent years. And when I say recent, the last quarter century, the Democrats have pretty much voted as one block on everything. And usually it's opposing any Republican program, but especially in the Donald Trump era, they have unanimously banded together and done everything possible to try to throw roadblocks and potholes and minefields up in the path of Donald Trump. It has been a unified effort for a long time, and it was as recent as just a couple of weeks ago when 45 senators voted to oppose a bill that would ban males from playing female sports, the most ridiculous stand anybody's ever taken politically, because it's just political suicide. If 80 to 90% of the country doesn't believe that that should be the case, how can these people step out on not even a shaky limb? They're doing basically a high rope act, a high wire act on some string. It's not sustainable. And for Chuck Schumer, of all people, the alleged leader of the delegation of Democrats in Washington, breaks ranks, which no Democrat has dared do for years. The House, they voted unanimously on everything. And you can't tell me that over 200 people have the exact same opinion on every issue, but they don't act individually. They vote along party lines because that's what they're ordered to do. So for Chuck Schumer to be the guy to break those ranks and go the other way, the far left is outraged, but a lot of other Democrats that are thinking, boy, I'm committing political suicide here, being forced to take these positions that the American people have no interest in and no support of. I think you're going to see more Democrats now say, well, you know what? I'm going to vote what I think, and I'm going to vote what my constituents want me to vote for. Because at the end of the day, That's what you're there for. You're not there to represent your individual wants and ideology and desires and goals. You're there to represent the people that sent you there. So this is a monumental thing that happened last Friday. I again was going to get into a New York Times headline today, but I'll save that for next week. The New York Times headline, just for a teaser, was it's time to admit, this was in Sunday's New York Times. It's time to admit we were wrong about COVID. How earth shattering is that? If you listen to any of my programs back when COVID was going on, I knew immediately just by applying simple common sense that everybody was getting it wrong about COVID. And the media, who was trying so desperately to get you to buy the banana of all the false information, all the fake news, all the misinformation they were feeding you, was not because they knew it was fact based. It was because it was a vehicle, just like everything else, to take down the runaway express that was Donald Trump. They were desperate in 2020. They knew if he was reelected, he was going to do exactly what he's doing today. And they delayed that 4 more years. They put us more and more in debt with that unfortunate maneuver shenanigan they pulled off in 2020. It was all a big ruse. So what? A million older Americans, vulnerable Americans who had other diseases, collateral damage. It's more important for us to keep our power in control. And they managed to do that for just 4 years, because the nightmare that right now is the wrecking ball named Donald Trump was in their immediate future in 2020, and they had to do something to stop it. With that note, I'm going to sign off today. Looking forward to getting together with Tony Kurre for another Kiefer and Kurre broadcast, and we'll have that for you coming up on the TKR app and all the Apple platforms, wherever you catch us every week. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Kip Kiefer signing off for this week's edition of Need to Know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.